Hi, and welcome to the third episode of Digital Worlds. This time we'll be exploring the world of Bohemia during the last knockings of the Middle Ages. The year is 1403, and the game is Kingdom Come: Deliverance. The story takes place during a period of political upheaval caused by a sequence of events known as the Papal Schism. King Wenceslas of Bohemia has been usurped and imprisoned by his younger brother Sigismund. During the hostilities, the men of Sigismund's army slaughter the humble family of the main character Henry. Henry, a particularly good choice of name for the hero, returns to his home to bury them and swears vengeance in the form of striving to restore the rightful king. You have an ally from the start in the form of the miller's daughter, who has rescued you from peril and buried your folks on your behalf. Plans are afoot to make her a fully playable character with her own storyline, but for the moment we'll stick to known quantities. As Henry, every one of your decisions has repercussions, whether they're immediately obvious or manifest so far down the line that you've forgotten which action may have created the current situation. You have to keep in mind that this is a reactive environment. How the game plays you depends entirely on how you play the game. Given that the game is in such an early phase of its development, the world in which it takes place is already extremely impressive. The mapping process that decided the game's locations was developed in an unconventional manner. Rather than come up with a number of locations in which to set the action and then map them into a wider environment, as you would in most fantasy games, maps of real places were studied and an area was selected which contained enough interesting locations to then fit the story around. In many ways it was the cartography that dictated the gameplay rather than the gameplay dictating the cartography. Some areas of the landscape had to be compressed for the simple reason that even the most dedicated player in search of realism would not wish to spend 18 hours of their precious game playing time travelling at walking speed between more distant locations. To this end, though the game playing area is large, the more mundane parts are not, thankfully, on a one-to-one scale. It is, however, extremely accurate, as the terrain for the final version was generated from a digital elevation map at a definition of 1 meter per pixel. A large reference library of images was also collected for each location so that the artists could see exactly what the places looked like. And while some of these features no longer exist in their original form, help from archaeologists was sought for the recreation of key buildings such as Rattay Castle, where only a part of the outer wall and the dungeons are as they were in the 15th century. As for the flora and fauna, these too are being worked on all the time. The animals are a mixture of wild and domestic. There are boar and wolves and fish, as well as sheep and chickens and horses, and these will try and hunt or avoid each other depending on species. The beasts follow nocturnal and diurnal phases, with their behaviour and sleep patterns adjusting accordingly. As Dan mentions in the interview, there are too many spruces in the forest for the environment of the time. This will be corrected, but they have also planted the seeds of a possible dark wood adventure in later chapters, for which they'd be perfect. The horses are not dumb animals. They can negotiate obstacles under their own guidance and shy away from threats to their safety. They have 3 speeds: walk, trot and gallop, and will also come to your whistle. They also have their own inventory system, so you can store items for longer journeys without further burdening poor Henry. The NPCs, or non-player characters, have been created using a clever system based around modular components which can be rearranged to generate a diverse variety of faces, body types, clothing and armour. The clothing and armour are actually layered onto the character along with the different qualities of the fabrics and metals. Because the cloth can pick up grime, dirt and worse, your clothes will need cleaning, but don't panic, as Kingdom Come is a long way from being yet another historical laundry sim. As for human behaviour, the NPCs are a lot more than the usual shop window dummies, and exhibit an interesting range of behaviour. For instance, if one of the peasants has had enough of hoeing the vegetable patch, he may wander off to the pub. However, if he finds it closed or full, he may or may not return to work. He may decide to spend the afternoon fishing instead. To get as near as possible to a first-hand experience of melee battle without actually starting one themselves, the chaps at Warhorse Studios visited various battle reenactment groups and hardcore fencing societies. From these, they deliberately chose the most extreme and dedicated of combatants to invite to the studio. Here they were surrounded with cameras, including head-mounted GoPros, and encouraged to cycle through their best moves. Once Warhorse became familiar with the kind of action they wanted in the game, these moves were repeated, with the combatants dressed in motion capture suits, digitised and imported into the game. The moves represent genuine medieval martial arts, and currently there are 18 attack combinations. What Kingdom Come Deliverance does that I think has been neglected by most games that involve combat is that a portion of the kinetic energy of each blow you deliver will be fed back to your player and denude your stamina levels. This might initially sound like bad news when facing a well-armoured opponent, but of course their stamina levels will be affected by the extra weight they're carrying in terms of metal. And though they may be able to resist stabbing and slashing blows, weapons like the dreaded armour hammer can be deployed with concussive and devastating results. If you're fast enough and of course smart enough, your opponent can be worn down, and as long as you avoid receiving a crippling blow, they will tire and begin to make mistakes. However, if your opponent is highly skilled, they can aim for weak points right away and bring the fight to a rapid close. Additionally, due to the nature of the combat dynamics, you will not be able to go on a high numbers killing spree for the simple fact that your character will literally have been in the wars and you'll be physically unable to tackle hundreds of instances. Having said that, Warhorse have promised huge battle scenes and castle sieges, so it'll be interesting to see how they balance the two factors. Not once for doing things by halves, the Warhorse team decided that for a genuinely authentic look, the swords and weapons featured in the game should be made in the real world first, and then scanned into their digital world. To this end, Dan enlisted the help of an old school friend who, coincidentally, happened to be a blacksmith. It was important that these swords were forged rather than pressed steel, because this way the imperfections of the process would be visible in the game assets. In future, perhaps as the range of weaponry increases, it might be an idea to get in touch with a museum to see if they would be amenable to the suggestion of having the original item scanned. Being able to fight with an exact digital replica of a weapon that was actually used during the period would be good marketing for both Warhorse Studios and the institution who provided the hardware. Having said that, I understand that crafting your own weapons will be an option, so perhaps I ought to keep my nose out. The funding of the game is a story in its own right, and I think I shall have to save that to bundle with some other Kickstarter funded games and perhaps dedicate a future episode to the subject. However, in short, the funding campaign was so successful that Warhorse Studios were pretty much forced to extend it to allow people to continue to back development in return for early access and in-game goodies. If you'd like to participate, all the links mentioned in this video can be found in the description box below, in which you can also find a link to the transcript of this video and my interview with Dan Vavra over at the Digital Digging website. If you've enjoyed this and would like to see more, please feel free to subscribe to my channel, and if you're feeling particularly enthusiastic, you might also wish to hit the like button. Well, thanks for watching, and hopefully I shall see you next time. Cheerio chaps, take care.